Hello, world, and welcome to the Pop Discourses, where we explore popular notions in the long conversation. I'm your host, Humboldt Ben. Oh yes, oh yes, oh yes, oh yes. Come gather round here, all ye who would attend to the humble observation of the flaming heart. So, pilot episode number 6 of the Pop Discourses. I've decided to take the experiment further, and we'll lay down another 5 pilot episodes just to continue to shake down the concept of the podcast. So I'm on here sua sponte on the Saturday following April Fool's Day 2021, just with a few off the top of my head observations. And I did want to delve further into the Catholic Encyclopedia definition of feudalism. That's just going to have to wait for right now. There's one overriding perceptual issue that I'd like to discuss. And I haven't even really delved further into the references that are coming to mind to lay this point out. We might do that later. But the thing is, that the dominant provider of information in our cultural sphere here in the United States is what is accurately described as a corporate media. I think it's pretty well understood that 6 media corporations, at least this is what the meme represents, control the mainstream media environment in the United States. And it's so easy to make the assumption that these media, news, and content providers have the public interest front and center. But unfortunately, from a traditional legal perspective, that's not the case, because what we know about corporations is that they do not exist to serve the public interest, but they do exist to serve the financial interest of their shareholders. And this was established in a case that revolved around Henry Ford's efforts to get a Model A Ford into every garage in the United States, and some shareholders sued him, saying that he couldn't distribute value at the expense of shareholders to the public. And that's the law that continues to exist today with regard to corporations. So if we take that to mind and consider the heavily advertising driven media corporations that control so much of the mainstream, there's certainly a cautionary notion in assessing whether they are truly representing a public interest or some private profit motive. Because after all, as we know, advertising has become such, and media coverage rather, as we know, advertising and media coverage has become such a major portion of the political environment. And if private corporate media influence is able to sway public opinion and influence public opinion toward one candidate or another and effectively becomes something of a kingmaker, what price would potential candidates be willing to pay to purchase that power? So that's really the environment that we're looking at. And there can be private influence behind the scenes from various profit-seeking interest groups that frame editorial policy, and buyer beware, as they say. Caveat emptor. Caveat emptor. So that's one of the reasons why the turn to alternative media appears to me to be of such interest, and that the seeking of an alternative narrative, like the standard used to be in medicine, to seek a second opinion from a medical doctor is so important. But of course, in the mainstream media, second opinions are not favored, and the certainty of the rightness of a propagated idea, product, candidate, etc., is really what we're dealing with. You know, there's need to fill the inquiries and meet the inquiries of the listening and viewing public with a total, non-debatable response. What does that sound like? I'll just leave that question there. So, there's something else that's really interesting about the Henry Ford story, because he apparently stretched the resources of understanding with regard to public interest. Because another feature of the history around Henry Ford is that when Ford auto workers were on strike seeking greater wages, and they marched on the mansion of Henry Ford in Michigan, that Henry Ford fortified his mansion with machine gun nests and fended off the striking workers in that way. So there again we begin to see how the corporate mentality is framed. I don't know what much more to say about that right now. It's just been on my mind. Just have wanted to get that out into the electrosphere as a point of consideration. Another thing that's kind of sticking in my craw is this, through the corporate media, these are political agendas that are, where we have just the megaphone effect of the corporate media really hyping this what I want to call move to restrict travel. And we see it in a proposed tax on automotive travel. I don't know whether that would extend to air travel or such. We see it in the COVID regulations. I mean, the considerations of the pandemic apparently are at least colorably a reasonable basis for the restriction of travel, but the entire treatment of how COVID has been portrayed in the corporate media is a fascinating study. The effects in terms of limiting freedom, of course, are well known, but the freedom to travel has previously been recognized as a fundamental freedom existing under the Constitution. Another vehicle for checking the right of the fundamental right to free travel is this so-called vaccine passport. And so, though the justifications for these kinds of activities seem noble and rational in pursuit of the public interest, as we've seen, the media that pushes this kind of restriction is not bound to the public interest. And so what we really see are the results that appear, or they're results that resemble the kinds of restrictions that are historically associated with tyranny. And of course, we have all these virtuous rationalizations to support them. And public safety certainly is a reasonable concern, but if fundamental rights are going to be under such attack politically, it seems to me it's incumbent upon we, the people, the citizens, to really subject the purported reasons for these kind of restrictions of the fundamental right to travel just to incredible scrutiny. And of course, here will come the corporate media and their private interest and say, oh, that's a conspiracy theory to say that we want to impinge unreasonably on a fundamental right of the people. Oh, well, the effect is to do that. The effect is to impinge upon this fundamental right. So there's appears to me to be plenty of room for inquiry and for personal autonomy in the face of social pressure bolstered and generated by the corporate media. It's an interesting dynamic, and the power of the electrosphere is not completely objectified at this point because its influence flies in to so many degrees under the radar. So our critical faculties in terms of media consumption, though it's been a topic that's been relevant for decades, certainly continues to be increasingly relevant at present. So these are just some notes, hopefully to clear the table for further content, but framing some of the concerns that we have here at the Pop Discourses, And right now, just want to not overload folks with information here on this holiday weekend. Maybe we'll get more into the Ford decision and the basis for the notion of fundamental freedoms, and return to the consideration of the echoes of feudalism that occur in the 1913 Catholic Encyclopedia entry on that topic, as they cast shadows of meaning on today's restrictive environment and the curtailment of liberty under the rubric of what's called the Great Reset. These things have been in planning for some time now, and I did see a statement that republics that devolve into corrupt oligarchies have never really been corrected historically. There's never been a readjustment to fundamental principles in history once the camel's nose of oligarchy is in the tent. And prime example is the Republic of Venice, which had constitutional principles to govern the distribution of the public wealth, and essentially over a period of 6 centuries or so, wealth devolved to certain elite families that were governed by constitutional rules. However, with each increasing power grab, the liberty and freedoms of the public would be curtailed until the socio-economic picture was one of elite entitled families served by an underclass of migrant, impoverished, disease-ridden citizens. Really weren't citizens. They were just a subservient population that existed in the context of republic to serve the republic without any particular stake, the interest of the republic. And this lasted from 13th century or so until the 19th century, when finally Napoleon, out of France, the reactionary general who took control of France after the French Revolution, conquered Venice with these words: "Renounce your constitution and adopt democracy." Very ironic terms, given what we are observing politically here in the 21st century. But of course, these political battles have been ongoing for millennia, and we have a historical record to inquire into and apply to the structure of the political battles. And we should perhaps keep in mind that the political philosophy that underpins our constitutional understanding and the developments in the American Republic, the Republic of the United States of America, were founded on learned observation of historical factors in an attempt to create a government that did not leave the underlying population in disease and poverty, as we had seen was the case, and not only the Venetian Republic and the examples of feudalism and at times monarchy, in these discussions of political philosophy that stem from religious antecedents, even the questions of these rights of fundamental freedom, fundamental fairness, protecting the people from the overreaching repressions of autocratic leaders, are political concerns that have engaged people who have had the leisure to do political thinking. It's engaged these people for many, many, many hundreds and even thousands of years. And this is my invitation for listeners to pick up the gauntlet of inquiry and discussion of the nature of government and a free people, and to make these continued historical inquiries and come to the kinds of metaphysical conclusions that can be embodied in the principles that the people move forward under. Well, this is just an invitation, like a card coming in the mail, because it's a vast human topic, and the inquiry is something that engages prolific material. So, chop chop, drink up, it's closing time.